How's everybody doing? There's not that many of you. We lost some people along the way, I guess. That's okay. So first we're going to do is the panel obviously is about tech for good, how startups are driving positive social change. So we're going to start off just introduce ourselves, do a little definition, what we think tech for good stands for, how we see it, and kind of talk about some startups that maybe some of us are involved in or startups that we're super interested in, and then we'd love for you guys to join in on the conversation if you want. There's not a lot of you, so if you want to come down front, you certainly could do that, so we can see you. But why don't we start with Leslie? You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Leslie Paz, and I am the founder and CEO of the Utilize app.
Okay, my name is Mike Ross, and I'm a founder and executive director of Future Forward Education, which is a nonprofit organization that aims to improve the academic and learning experience for youth by taking a whole family, bottom-up approach. So it's not just student-centric, it's more system-centric, and that we're wanting to focus on some of the fractures that exist within the foundation of education so that we can, down the road, reach more families, more students, more administrators, and more educators.
Hi, I'm Matt Combs. I'm the CTO of Heal Smart Yarns and Volt AI. We are integrating NASA sensors into fabric and using artificial intelligence to detect infections on wounds. Very interested in wearable technology, and I'm very excited to be a part of the panel.
Now, I'm Mark Snyderman. I'm an attorney and a serial entrepreneur. So my company is Next Point Ventures. We are what I call a venture studio. We use our own internal capital to incubate and accelerate companies. We focus on startups that are in the social good realm. So this is obviously a good topic for me. And we have a couple different startups that I'd like to highlight today. But one of the things I'd like to start with, and Matt, if you can start, why don't you give us, kind of your definition of tech for good?
Oh, sure. That's very exciting. Well, this all comes about from this request from the DoD about what they call the magic hour. And the magic hour is that if you're in combat and you're injured, you've got about 60 minutes to decide whether or not you need to be medically evacuated. And if you don't identify that significant event, it could take between 24 and 72 hours to extract you from the battlefield. So the magic hour is very critical for our men and women who are fighting overseas. And what we envision is using artificial intelligence on bandages to speed up that decision making, to allow people to notice that they're critically wounded and they need medical evacuation. So when the topic came up, tech for good, I thought, wow, if there was ever an application that was relevant to it, that is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's a good use case scenario for using AI to advance medical treatment and keep people healthy and safe. So this was a perfect topic for us.
Yeah, so regarding the education space, obviously there's a lot we can do with technology as long as we're careful that we're not bombarding all of our students with everything that's possible in the technology space. But what's really exciting about providing more educational opportunities, specifically more regarding like STEM programming, is a lot of those platforms we can gain real-time feedback on what the students are producing in terms of like responses, and that it can be really, really dynamic. So externally on our end, we can almost watch in real time like what's coming back. And I know it varies from district to district and school to school, but with the current models, we can't always get back every piece of information we need to determine effective solutions for being reactive to the needs of students. So externally, we can build like data sources in which we're tracking, measuring progress over time. An example being a financial literacy program, which we have a physical version, and we can create a digital version that exists in the cloud, and then we're gaining insights into responses for each of the programs, for each of the lessons. and then we can evolve over time with the student. I think that's really important to be continuously reactive. So I think that's a really good example of interfacing technology with students in the education space.
The question, what was it again? I'm sorry.
So it's kind of, how do you define tech for good?
Oh, how do I define it? Just using tech for like different everyday life, um, from infrastructures of like transportation to like he mentioned education, literally everything you can think of, finance, just to make everybody's life just easier, maybe simpler. I don't, more efficient, more like seamless. Reduce, I don't know, time when it comes to waiting for transportation or like a Lyft or a Tesla or something. Even with what's going on with the Boring Company, that's owned by Elon Musk. Um, that train that goes from, I believe, New York to LA, I think, in like a short.
There's a vision of it, but
Yeah, but that's what I see as being tech for good, like, improving the lives of everyday people, of the everyday life. So that's how would I would describe it.
no, that's good. So when I was thinking about it, I actually, I'm a lawyer, so I have to research everything. So I went and looked up to see where did the phrase start, and it was actually in 2006 in the UK. They were running hackathons on the weekends, so they would have, developers come in on the weekends or technologists come in on the weekends to try to solve like environmental or social impact issues, and they would just hack at them all weekend and then come up with different texts. So somebody had come up with like, how do you a technology to help stimulate the coral reefs off the coast in of Africa, right? Because the coral reefs haven't been surviving. We've destroyed them in the environment. So how do you solve some of those issues? So that's kind of where the phrase came from, and it's adopted. So now you hear, and I think it's all reasonable to say, like, it's adopted so much since then because technology moves at, as we all know, at like warp speed these days.
Yes.
So think about 2006 to now, it's a different world. Like we live in a completely different world than we did in '06, like, from a tech perspective. So why don't you talk a little bit about a startup or maybe your own startup and how you see it working as tech for good?
Startups. Okay, well, for my startup, it solves like a small problem. I think it's not that big of an issue, but it's definitely a hassle and a frustration for many. I know it was for me, and that's why I created it. But my company, what it does, it searches and finds your utility service provider in your area, and it allows you to view, manage, and pay all your utility service provider bills in one place. So that includes telecommunications, water, waste, electricity, natural gas, your internet, your cable. And the frustration that comes from that is like, I worked in the cybersecurity field for almost 4 years, and I was on the defense side of it, and I ironically got hacked. So when I got hacked, I had to change all my information. I had to buy a new phone, change my email, change my number, and then having to go to each utility service provider and updating all of that was such a huge hassle. Like I don't think many people understand the issue, like the problems that you come across when you're trying to do that, or if you're moving from one location to another location, you don't know who your utility provider is, you don't know their number, and having a seamless, easy, simple, user-friendly app like mine, the Utilize app, to do all that, I think it solves a small issue, but maybe like an issue that people don't even know is an issue yet, but it can be very convenient in the long run. But there are definitely a lot bigger issues that can be solved by technology. So, like I mentioned, like transportation, even education, like teaching people, people can learn a lot better, a lot faster, and be able to apply those skills in order to get jobs or build their own business, and like it's all like interconnected in a way. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, So I'm actually going to precede my answer with an extended version of my definition for tech for good. So I like to consider determining what the good is in tech for good by measurable outcomes. So sometimes we come up with this amazing idea and we build a business or a product or a service, and we immediately get anxious about measuring its effectiveness. And unfortunately, something like that could take a year, 2 years, 5 years of continuous use to determine how good that tech is. So there's a lot of patience required for something like that. But I think now I'm going to talk about like a mini story, personal story of mine, to kind of tie that in. So I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. I didn't grow up on West Coast. I grew up on the East Coast, the countryside. So we had fields, valleys, trees everywhere. And it was peaceful. I got every resource I needed at my school. It was all very relative in that I could see every student around me getting the same resources, and I thought that was normal. I was naive and ignorant reflecting back now, but coming out to LA and spending time in that city, I started to see other sides of community that I didn't see. Adversity, poverty, homelessness, and a lack of opportunity or resource scarcity. And that didn't didn't sit well with me, and that ultimately was an important variable to wanting to build my own organization. I did spend some time working or volunteering at other nonprofit organizations to help students with school or homework and whatnot, but I didn't have much of a voice being just a volunteer. I couldn't move my ideas around. So fortunately, before moving out, I did have a great program attached to my high school that was a technology program. And that was the first time that I felt like I was actually learning, not because I didn't enjoy or want to learn previously, but it was hands-on. It was the first time I was learning by doing. And that improved my ability to retain information. And I was able to do that for 2 years, junior and senior year. And I consider those 2 years to be like the most transformative of my life, because I was interfacing with something that I cared about, that being technology and tools that allowed me to be creative. And I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have started an organization if I didn't get to have that opportunity. So I think that's a really good example of what tech can do for good. And also, something like that is something to reflect on further to see how we can create more of those opportunities for others, again, in that education space.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that my kind of interaction with Tech for Good has been because of my experience with the Office of Technology Transfer of NASA, and I've been lucky enough to work with the Langley Research Center since 2018, and it was kind of a series of left turns because we had this electrically conductive yarn, and then we found out it could be made into sensors, and then when we started working with the sensors, we applied for a license, and what I found was that there was very little support at NASA. You had these PhD scientists that had this great technology, and then we became, through the Office of Technology Transfer, a licensee, and we started working with it. And I thought they had a manual, and I thought they were going to hand us a manual and go, here's how the sensors work. And instead, my first contact over there was a guy named Ken Dudley, and he was very Socratic. And he said, what do you want to measure? And I said, let's measure temperature. And he said, okay, we'll set up a sensor and do a parametric study. And he just kind of trailed off. And I said, well, what do you mean, do a parametric study? And he said, well, let's measure temperature reading the network analyzer, and it's got an inverted peak called a null. And let's look at that null, and let's time gate it, and let's measure how it changes with a validation device, with another type of a thermometer. And so I was a little frustrated. I said, you expect us to commercialize with a parametric study? And he laughed, and he said, that's how we do everything at NASA, is with parametric studies. So I embarked on this learning curve to learn how to interpret the sweep on the network analyzer, and it took more than 6 months before I actually looked at it and understood what I was looking at. And we knew on the path to commercialization that we needed an app. And getting the app was a nightmare. I mean, Texas Instruments, I hope they're not here, they quoted us $400,000. We declined that. We had a bunch of other companies that wanted anywhere between $100,000 and $300,000 to do an app. But I met a brilliant computer programmer who said, I'll do it for $60,000. And so what we wanted was our customer to pay for it, because our business model was, let's not build it and hope they come. Let's let a customer or a client who's interested in being a licensee of the technology, let them fund part of the development fee. Let them have some skin in the game. And I've poured money into things in the past that didn't get commercialized and then had something sitting on the shelf that I paid for that I couldn't sell to anybody. So it was very important for me that whoever does this would buy in and have skin in the game. And what happened is that computer programmer said to me, I'll tell you what, I'll do the app for free, but form a company with me and let me be a 1/3 owner of that company. And we said, okay. And along with another participant, we formed Volt AI. And he said it would take 6 months, and he did it in 4. And he created software to read the sensors. And then, boom, all of a sudden, we had lay people who could just look at the sensor and interpret the data coming off the sensor. And so that's been my journey, and that's sort of how I ended up here. When Field reached out to me, it was because of the work we did with Volt AI that they were most interested in. And we have custom electronics that are being delivered this month, and we have 2 universities and 3 industry partners that are getting beta testing test kits of sensors and electronics. So for me, the evolution has been, wow, someone like me had to go read a network analyzer, but my customers are going to be untrained, and they're going to look at AI, and we've even tried running the results of the network analyzer through ChatGPT, and it worked fine without the custom software. So really, due to technology, we're at the point where we can help people improve their lives and detect infection and do these other use cases like sleep monitoring. So for me, it's all been a dream come true. It seems like there was a lot of nights where I thought, is this a good use of my time when I was trying to learn the network analyzer? But all the people at NASA were very supportive, and they said, progress comes in little steps. And if you're too impatient, you'll never get to your goal because you'll give up before you get there. So that's kind of my takeaway on it, is that all of us in our businesses, we want it to happen so quickly, but we have to recognize that progress takes time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I didn't think we were going to take a tech transfer turn, which is super interesting for me because I have a tech transfer background and did a lot with Fed Tech Transfer. And if you don't know, and it's actually an interesting sort of offshoot for this topic of Tech for Good, which is, the U.S. government, our tax dollars fund a ton of research every day at the federal labs, and NASA has a lot of laboratory. NASA is the king of tech transfer. A lot of things that you own, that you use personally in your life every day, came from NASA, from the space program. That's why the space program exists. It's not because we're trying to go to space. It's because we want to develop really cool tech. So it's actually and I'd love to talk about that stuff offline if somebody wanted to talk tech transfer. So super cool for you that you actually were successful and have gotten it down a path, because a lot of people go down the path and don't really get anywhere. Because as you heard, they're not the most helpful. Shocker that our government isn't the most helpful people.
But let me just add to that point. What I learned the hard way is that's not the business they're in. They're in the business of launching satellites into space, not holding the hands of the licensees on the tech transfer.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So I think I'll give I have a couple different techs that I support through my venture studio, and I'll give one example now. I'll probably give the other one in a little bit. So we look at Tech for Good and try to say, okay, where can we deploy technology that's going to be beneficial? And you have to look at, I call it philanthropic capitalism, right? Sometimes sometimes you're coming up with a concept that is going to make money, but it has a whole different perspective and a whole different purpose. So we developed a company called Funworks, and what we do at Funworks is, so you have most companies, when you hit a certain amount of people, maybe you're 50, 100 people above, you start to think about like, okay, my employees want to be able to give to charity. We want to give to charity as a company. We want to match. Maybe we want to do a matching program. Maybe we want to do volunteering programs. And if you ever run one of these for your company, you realize it's not that easy, right? You know, the payroll piece of it is a total pain in the butt, right? It's really difficult. Your payroll department's furious with you that you asked them to do a match because now you've added, you know, 3 days of work that they have to do in the same 2 weeks. They have to do payroll every 2 weeks, and they have to figure out how they're going to get the match done, how they're going to get the payroll deductions in. The same thing with volunteering, right? It sounds like it's super easy, but now you got to get, you know, you need waivers for people to go. You want to do Habitat for Humanity, they have waivers. They have all these different pieces that you need. So what we set out to do was, why can't we just build tech to do all that? Like, it shouldn't be that. You can make it so that you can make it easier for people to give money, right? And then what if you tied into all the charities that exist in the country so that you can say, okay, hey, you know what? I'm really interested in autism in children, and I think music. Is there a charity that does that? Well, of course there is, but how would you find it, right? And you would know where to look. Well, we have it all built into the system, so we have AI running over it to make sure that you can find anything you're sort of interested in as a individual, as an employee, so that you feel like your money is going where you want it to go, and you're supporting causes that are interesting to you. So it's a really interesting, you know, we think it's a really interesting use of tech for good, where we're kind of taking, you know, trying to find, just like you are, right? In the end, you're just trying to take things that are really hard, that are nuisances, that are processes, and use technology to make them easier, right? And make them more accessible, and make people actually want to use them. So, you know, we're not positive yet that we've made that much of a change, right? Because we can't measure it. I mean, we can measure how many dollars have been given. You know, we have a giving fund that, you know, we have to collect money, so we see all the dollars going, so we know there's definitely movement, but you're not sure what the total change is yet. But the volunteering piece is super interesting as well, because that's an area where you really, like, I'm not really sure how we're going to measure the value of what we did. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I kind of want to add on to that a little bit regarding running into obstacles and various processes that are just like bottlenecks to like progress. So when building an education-focused nonprofit, I will say entering was based off a discovery moving out west from the East Coast, and not because I was already in the system. So obviously not having that background and a network that was full of educators made that exceptionally challenging. So questions like, how do I connect with teachers? How do I connect with students? How do I connect with schools? And so those are some of the many issues that we face. But like to your point about creating tech to help with that, so luckily I'm fortunate enough to have a background in the tech space. So like building applications or delegating the application development to another team to help build the communication systems so we can engage with schools, and then they have their own kind of platforms for that. And so building software that does the interfacing. Another thing too I want to point out is like data. I'm really obsessed with data because we can see problems and solutions in data, right? So I'm wanting to track that at all times, so we can like schools and districts have their own plethora of data sources, but it's also very overwhelming to look at. You can look at one metric and it varies a little bit from source to source. So we're interested in building our own tracking system to pull data and do continuous like qualitative analysis over time, like as a detachment, so that it doesn't get like blended and contaminated with current data sources. So seeing as how important data collection is to determining what we can do for students, that's another good example of how we can capitalize on building tech for good.
I'm going to ask you a question. Okay. So How can startups collaborate with larger tech companies to drive meaningful change?
Uh, Pretty much what I said a little bit earlier and what we were currently discussing. I also think that large tech companies, once they get like established and they make like a household name for themselves, I feel like they get stubborn and they don't want to adapt to change. They don't want to listen to new perspectives. So startups, because they're with coming up with fresh new ideas, new perspectives. They're coming up with these startups out of scratch, or it's because they saw something that's already existing in the world, and they just found it. Like myself, I found it like a hassle. I found it frustrating, stressful, annoying. Like it literally pissing me off. So I was like, maybe I can fix this, and that's if a startup is successful, they can teach these larger tech companies, um, something new, and also they can collaborate in a way that they could maybe reduce some costs in their company. They can make it some things easier for them, or but at the same time, I think that they get so big that they kind of make it about revenue, and they don't really care about the users anymore. And I think that users, they're looking for companies that they can like connect with, right? They're looking for companies that are actually listening to them, and that are trying to solve problems for them in their everyday life, rather than like just some big company that wants to take their money, and I think that larger companies can learn from that. And I think they think, oh no, it's not going to work because this way has worked for us for so long. If we test that out, or if we try that out, we could lose revenue, we could lose users. And I think it's just counterintuitive. Like it could probably work out even better. I don't know. That's what I think.
That's great. I also think that one of the ways that big you can work with big companies as a startup is a lot of the big companies actually have funds where they'll allocate towards startup, and they like to choose tech for good as something they want to invest in, because it's something that they won't invest their own dollars in. They won't risk it. So they'll take a piece of, like take a Comcast, for example. I'm an East Coaster, so Comcast is our super huge guy in Philly, right? They're the biggest company in Philly. They have startup funds that you can apply for and get into their programs. So that's one way that a startup can try to work with. If you have a concept for tech for good, it's one way you can try to go to a big company and say, hey, I have this phenomenal idea. Can you help me? Like, what would it take for you guys to help me fund that? And that's one way to go after sort of the bigger company, to try to partner with them, because as you said, they are averse to it, right? So you got to kind of drag them through.
Yeah, I think there's so much to unpack there, and both of you made really, really, I think, concise observations about the way that business is done, especially here in the USA. And I want to add my own humble opinion to that, which is that I see that there's like a tech conveyor belt. And I believe that large companies are like very big animals. They're like elephants. And they need to eat a lot to survive. And if they don't, they falter and they fail. And so luckily, I'm not an employee or a member of a very big company. But what I see with big companies is they're very bottom line motivated, and they're not creative. And so in this country, they rely on small and mid-sized businesses to be the creators of something new. And then we have this wonderful M&A conveyor belt that links ideas or patents or startups or even mid-sized companies with a much larger company that has a strategic advantage to using that patent or using that new technology. And I think we do it really, really well here in the USA, maybe better here than anywhere else, where you've got a lot of brilliant people that are they're at universities, they're at grad schools, or they're just people that built something in their garage, but they saw a way to do it better, but they don't have the funding to take it to the next level. And then they go out and they do their Kickstarter or their crowdfunding or their GoFundMe, and all of a sudden, someone in a high up position in a big company becomes aware of it, and they have to have the courage to say, wow, I can leverage this new technology. They can't scale. The inventor can't scale. The small business can't scale. The mid-sized business doesn't have the capital to scale. But a large company that's not creative says, oh, wow, I can buy that patent or I can buy that company, and we can leverage that, and we can compensate the inventor and bring him along for the ride. And I think that's how it works, and I think that's how it's functioning now. And I'm excited to be a part of that because I've had a little bit of experience in Europe, and I was lucky enough to live in South Korea for a couple of years. And in these smaller countries, it's much harder, and it's much more competitive, and there's so much less opportunity to fund tech than there is here. So I think everybody made really, really good points.
Oh, yeah. So, on your analogy of like companies being animals that are constantly needing to eat, absolutely. So and they're also really familiar with what they've been eating, so they're afraid to try something else, right? So in the context of like my organization, I consider it as a startup, but the school or district or the system of education is like this beast, right? So when we're trying to collaborate or communicate with this beast, it's extremely overwhelming. And obviously starting out, it's emails alone don't work, so we have to think way outside of the box with that. And I'm a firm believer that showing can be a lot more impactful than just telling or talking. So we have like ideas that we want to implement in schools, and we know we can't just go in and be like, oh, no, we got this idea, we want to do X, Y, Z with your students. But if we're not showing them any of that, that's going to disappear like overnight. So I'm really adamant about being able to be open to prototyping, building out an actual functioning, like demoable product, and then bringing that in. I think that has a lot more impact, like 100% of the time. And that ties into data. So not only that, but you also should be able to speak their language. So also do the preliminary homework and research to understand the audience. So if you're getting data back and you learn about the demographics and the neighborhood of the schools in which you want to work with, you're doing that analysis, so you're speaking their language when you go in, and then you have your prototype list, something that they can actually see and use, and show them with data. Could be mock data initially, yeah, but just so they can get some insight into what that looks like.
I'm gonna hit you with a question.
Sure.
You ready?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Oh, I'm ready.
So, what are some of the most promising tech trends that are driving positive social impact today?
Well, I think in healthcare, the use of AI as a diagnostic tool, I think that's huge. And, doctors have a mandate to do no harm, but insurance companies also have to support doctors that are using new techniques to reduce the cost of care. And everybody in this room knows that the cost of health insurance is high and the cost of medical treatment is high. And using AI to improve medical care, reduce the cost of medical care, diagnostics with AI, and speed up healing using AI, I think that this is one of, there's maybe two other markets where it's really impactful, but I think this is one of the biggest ones where there's going to be a very radically changing landscape over the next 3 to 5 years with the adoption of AI technologies for diagnosis and also for prognosis.
Okay. Well, I'll jump on that one because it's actually one of the techs that we're invested in as well. It's a blockchain tech, fintech play, but we actually, in the end, it's really a healthcare data grab, I would say. So we have we're called Hyperion. We've created variable NFTs for healthcare data. So we've sold, I think we're at about 5 million NFTs sold in India currently for collection of healthcare data from students. So schools are paying us to provide variable NFTs for each student, so we can pull in healthcare data out of disparate sources as well as the school as they track about 7 different markers that are currently tracked by hand in India, because there's 6 or 7 diseases that are common within the country that they've been tracking for years, and we're bringing in the digital ability to do that on blockchain, so that we can then use AI to actually do some predictive analytics and really get some really better data as to what's really going on in some of these rural areas, to provide better care. So that's kind of we're in the same, we're definitely seeing the same pathway.
Can I ask a question about that? Because that's really fascinating to me. How did you get the traction to make the introductions to get those programs in place? That must have been extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's been a true adventure. We started the company here in the United States thinking that we were gonna make great waves in the United States healthcare system, and the founder is he's done multiple exits in the healthcare space here in the U.S. He did the tech transfer for the Hep C vaccine from Emory way back when. So he's successful. We have good track record, good people. We thought it would go well. It went absolutely nowhere in the United States. We couldn't break anything. Nobody wanted to talk about blockchain. Nobody wanted to talk about data. Nobody wanted to talk about any of it. So we actually realized our founder was at a conference in Bermuda, of all places. There was a blockchain conference. He was speaking. The premier of Bermuda was sitting in the audience and grabbed him afterward and said, "This is super interesting. This can solve a lot of problems. We're interested." And Bermuda, the country, signed an MOU with us to change out their healthcare rails to blockchain and move everything. That was kind of our real win, right? And then we have people on the ground in India, doctors and PhDs that have good connections, and we kind of used the microcosm of Bermuda to say, hey, this is what we can do, and trying to bring that into other countries. We believe at some point we'll end up back in the United States, but I think it's probably 4 or 5 years from now.
Right, but I think this is a huge point for everybody who's interested in this, is that I think all of us, our own experience has been that we're looking for these early adopters of new technology, and there's not a lot of people willing to do it. There was a very famous Wall Street Journal article called Crossing the Chasm, and if you Google that, there's a bell-shaped curve, and it shows you that 21% to 22% of people are willing to adopt a new technology, and then you have what they call the chasm. And after enough new adopters have adopted technology, mid-stage adopters and late adopters go, okay, I'm going to give it a chance. And that's where you hit your growth, where you're at the bell-shaped part of the curve. But we're all sort of trying to get these early adopters of new technology to listen to us. And I think it takes brave people, or people at least that have courage, to say in their organization, I want to make a change and I want to use new technology. And so that's inspirational that you got where you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just going to hit on the topic of data again, because I think I've mentioned the importance of being able to collect that and analyze it like consistently and ongoing. And so I think any company, and this isn't revolutionary or anything, a lot of companies do utilize data, but any company that has the tracking and analysis of data as a normal, consistent track of everything they do, every function they do, is going to stand out. I think not only does data help us determine, like, see problems and see solutions, but also tells a story over time. So there's like talks of like Department of Education data potentially not being utilized anymore or just vanishing, which is pretty reckless in my opinion. We need to look way back, decades even, to understand patterns in education, to formulate like how we can innovate going forward, and then do that constantly. And I'm still pretty new to working inside the system of education, so this is based off observation, but there are certain gaps within the transaction of the educator and the student in the classroom, and this varies from school to school, but there are certain gaps where not enough data is being collected, and that's also because it's a complex system and there's not time for it. But that, I'm just reiterating the importance of being able to fill those gaps in. So we always have a way of measuring growth and progress, and being able to be more reactive to that extremely dynamic landscape. And that's for really any industry. That's just an example.
No, you're absolutely right. And in manufacturing, there's a mantra, which is that if you can measure it, you can manage it. But if you're not looking at KPIs and you're not measuring anything, then there's nothing to manage. You're sort of a runaway train. So I think you nailed it. Sure, we should be collecting all the data we can. Even if we can't process it now, it's valuable in and of itself.
Yeah, even if it's like decades old, just preserve it for the same reasons.
I couldn't agree more.
So Leslie, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one global challenge with technology, what would it be? I know it's a tough one.
That's hard. I might have to pass, but because there's just so much you can do. Like there's just so much. So what is it? What social what?
Just wherever you think that you would like to see tech used, that would be a great solution.
To like our global issues.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I mean. Like there's just too many, way too many, and I would want to say all of them, but like I'm trying to think. What's like. Oh, it's so tough. I
Yeah.
can't. I'm gonna have to pass. I'm so sorry.
Well, I would say if I were to have a magic wand, I would say everyone has opportunity and chance. I feel like education is our most important asset, and if we solve that, then it's like a trickle-up effect. We can reach community and create a connectivity that we all need. So opportunity brings union and peace.
I think there's a real need to make countries connected in as far as their intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing. And I'm not talking about countries that we're currently at odds with or that we're in conflict with, but I feel like from the military side or the law enforcement side, if we could just share resources, we could put an end to things like human trafficking and drug smuggling and kidnapping. And I was a victim of a ransomware attack in 2021, and it was devastating to my company. It almost put us out of business. I would love to see all of our allies sharing information to help keep us safe and protected.
Yeah, that's a super interesting one. I feel like I have another tech that I can talk about because I have a company called Impact, and we started out actually with the goal of doing data sharing and information sharing for law enforcement in order to try to pick up the intel. And so my house had been robbed, and I live in suburbia, New Jersey. It was part of it was a professional group that was actually the Ukrainian mob. They did 32 houses in my neighborhood and two surrounding neighborhoods over a 3-day period over the holidays. Of course, we had been away and we got home and my house had an alarm. We had all the normal stuff that you have, but they were professionals. You know, they knew what to do, right? They knew how to cut the alarm panel. They knew how to short the alarm panel. They were in and out of my house in 4 minutes. But they did get off with some stuff and, you know, lost some really sentimental historic pieces from our family, things like that. And when I realized that it had happened in 30 houses in the neighborhoods, you're like, and it was different towns. And, you know, you realize that our police officers hadn't spoken to the next town over, hadn't spoken to the other town, and maybe they would have been able to do something about what it was. And we started to delve into the issue, and here's kind of tech for good, right? You know, you say, where could we use tech, right? There has to be a way to put some technology where you could have, you know, an AI agent overlooking things, maybe matchmaking, not solving crime, not doing anything like that. Really, it was, you know, hey, Officer A and B are speaking on this app that we built about this case. Officer B and C in another town are talking about the same thing. The AI realizes it's really the same MO, and all it does is say, hey, officers from both towns, you may want to talk to each other because something's going on that's the exact same pattern. right? And the AI could recognize that pattern. Well, talk about hard industries to break into, to bring tech in particular. Law enforcement is definitely high on that list, and DoD is also high on the list in terms of how do you get them to actually share information and want to share across. So it's definitely an area where like we've pivoted that company 4 times. So when you know, one of the things I would like to ask is, you know, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs? For me, it's pivot, 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 especially in the tech for good space. Like you'll never, you know, you're not likely to end up where you started. Like it's just like you're just always moving from. All right, so we started in law enforcement. We realized we couldn't get any real traction. We tried hospitals. We couldn't get any real traction because we were focused on workplace violence because hospitals have the highest percentage of workplace violence. We're like, oh, this is a great use of this. We have great tech. We have everything. You just couldn't break it. And you know, you don't have, you know, maybe it's part of its capital, part of its, you know, the desire of the company to want to make a change. I think it goes back to large institutions that don't want to change, right? You have just trouble with them. So, and now we have the most traction we've ever had right now with the mental health community, which is, you know, I think a super important topic for us to work in the mental health community and trying to bring together people. So, I mean, basically the app is essentially Slack. It's a Slack-like product that is actually secure, unlike Slack, which is, you know, wide open and anybody can can hack you at any given day.
Wow, that's amazing. And I have some insight into that because we make some law enforcement products now, and I can tell you that most departments in the USA, they've got 5 deputies or less. And you've got some behemoths like LAPD has 8,967 officers. NYPD is at 28,000 right now. Chicago's second largest in the country. But if you look at those 3 and you throw them out as outliers, most of the country is suburban or rural areas with very small police forces and a very low budget. And the budget that they have, it has to be spent on ballistic vests or life-saving equipment. And they look at anything new and experimental as who's going to pay for it. And that's the definition of the problem. Who's going to pay for it? So I think, yeah, another point you made that I think is extremely important is that we all pivot as owners of small or mid-sized companies. We've been pivoting since before the pandemic, but anytime we need to adopt our business model to make more money, we have to do it. And you either change or you get left behind. So yeah, I mean those are 2 very important fundamental concepts.
I just want to reiterate your point about when you start and where you are now is never going to be the same, and I think that is a good quality in that we're able to adapt to the idea of changing to accommodate our potential clients or customers. Regarding my organization, I don't even call it like a pivot. It's not a sidestep, more a pivot forward, and that we've like learned a ton about the industry, and every time we engage with school officials or anyone in that industry, we're getting more insights into how we can accommodate or interact with that system. So it's not so much always the products and services that change. It's like adding on top of that list and the mission being altered. I think now I'm like at version 27 of a mission statement because I think I mentioned earlier it started off like very student centric. When I first had these revelations, I wanted to focus on the student primarily, and then I did more digging. I went down 1,000 rabbit holes and found more issues like in the system of things. So it was this zoom out effect, which means that the mission can never possibly remain the same. And I think it's part of the formula of like having a startup and entrepreneurship is that's going to happen basically 100% of the time, and that we're open to that adaptability.
I think that's why, as we think about tech for good, we don't think about single products or even single systems, but we think about platforms of systems. So I know I personally am no longer interested in single applications, and we pitch a lot to the federal government. And now, I'm not sure if people know this, but the US federal government, DoD, when you send them a pitch deck, it's one single slide called a quad chart. They no longer accept PDFs, and I think the conclusion that we can all come to is no one in the federal government is going to read a 2-page PDF. But they will look at your one-page quad chart, which is a very simple presentation of the tech problem, your solution, the technology readiness level, and your dual use. And I think that's the important point here, is that DoD will no longer buy technology that's only for military use. They only will look at technologies that have dual use for commercialization in the commercial sector as well as the military sector. And so when we think about tech for good, we've got to think about platforms of products with dual use.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I'm gonna add on to that real quick. So, yeah, tech for good. So, I think my total regarding the evolution of adaptability from where you start and where you are now, if that kind of evolution did not exist within the context of education and what it is we're trying to do, the audience or potential audience or total achievable market for what we're doing would be minute. It would be tiny. I wouldn't even been looking at schools. So that's suddenly a much broader, larger body of people that could potentially receive services and products because of that evolution. So I just want to add on.
Yeah, I think we're close to the end. I don't know if you of our time, if you guys want to have a last statement, or if there's any questions from the audience. I'll take that as a no.
Anybody?
So I would just like to thank the panelists and appreciate everybody's time today. I think, it's a super important topic to talk about how we can take technology and use it for good, and how startups are really where that's going to happen. They're the ones that are going to make it go. Like we talked, at length about, the behemoths of the world aren't going to solve the problems. It's up to us, the entrepreneurs, to come up with ways to go beat the doors down and go find ways to do this. And, like I said, it's a topic that's near and dear for me and I think for all of us on the panel, to find new ways to use technology for good and solve a lot of the problems that exist in the world. And, tech can be used for good. It's not always so bad. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.